Okay, filming this on the cell phone, which is not the greatest, but I don't know. I don't usually record how-to videos, but I don't know. Maybe I'll start that someday. Anyhow, okay, looking at an Athearn locomotive. This one's a little bit newer. This one's a Athearn ready to run from probably 90s, late 90s, 2000s. But these all the way back to the Athearn blue boxes, basically the same. Plenty of interchangeable parts. A couple of key differences changed over time, but pretty much working on these, ready to run, or the older blue box locomotives are my favorite engines to work on and favorite engines to buy and run, just because they're very well designed. Simple, perhaps, and I know some people think that they're just the worst thing ever because they can be loud and because they have an open frame motor. I honestly don't understand people's fascination with CAN motors, something that's not serviceable. On these engines, I can take anything apart and find replacement parts and get it going again, especially the motor. So, anyhow, yeah, servicing locomotives. So this one, this is a ready to run. It's got the kind of brass can right here, essentially on the motor, with two separate magnets. I can show you there. There's one inside here, one inside here. Older Athearns were one piece cast steel, I believe, cast steel magnet that wrapped around the entire motor core. Um, Supposedly this one's a little bit better, but either way, they both work. All magnets get old with age and use, and especially heat. If a motor's been overheated, that magnet will usually be damaged. You can get an old magnet working again by putting a rare earth magnet on it. Sometimes one on each side, sometimes just one attached to the magnet if it's all one piece. You have to kind of play with it, but if you go get yourself a pack of rare earth magnets, sometimes you can actually breathe old life into an old motor without having to completely replace the magnet. First thing to check when you're working on these. Number one, is the motor secure? These are rubber motor mounts. Okay? These old white rubber ones turn into hardened yellow rubber mounts, rubber motor mounts. They fall apart and they crack, and then your motor is not going to sit correctly. This one, it's all right. There's a little bit of wiggle to it, but that's about as much as you want. If your motor's rocking back and forth in here, it's not securely held, and when this motor is going to try to turn these drive shafts on either side, it's going to cause the motor to torque and just not work very efficiently. Most of the larger engines, the ones with the four posts or two posts per mount, one, two here, one mount, one, two here, the other mount. Most of those you can get new plastic ones where you put the mounts on the motor, drop the motor in, and then you run little Phillips screws in here. Those tend to work better. Some of the older smaller engines like the little SW switchers, the Baldwin VO1000, you're stuck using the rubber motor mounts, and they work. They'll work for about 30 years at a time. So, which is plenty of time, If you own an engine long enough and you have to go replace the motor mounts again 30 years from now, you've hopefully had some fun. All trains are supposed to be fun, and they're more fun when they run and when they run well. So that's the number one thing to check: is your motor securely mounted? Number two, look at your commutator. Okay, this one's dirty. You can see this right here. You have your two motor brushes. These are held in with springs underneath these little clips right here. As long as you have brush there, it's probably fine. If your motor brushes are worn out and you can see the spring, you can buy new springs. But one of the number one things to check is how dirty is your commutator. This should all be shiny copper. This right here, you're seeing the black stripe, is carbon from the motor brushes. It gets really bad if you get oil in those brushes and then it arcs and burns, and you're always going to have some sort of carbon buildup with a brushed motor. That's just the way it is, and it's a maintenance item. Every so often you got to open this up, get yourself a Q-tip or a cotton swab or something with some isopropyl alcohol on it, and just press it up against this and turn the motor over by hand to remove as much of that black streak as you can. While you're doing that, one thing a lot of people overlook, if I can get it focused here, maybe, You got to take something very fine, like a fine jewelry screwdriver, flat blade, and gently clean out the carbon buildup between these commutator sector plates. You can see right here, this one's not bad. This one is all gummed up. You can see the carbon's built up in there. You need to clean that out. Do not scratch the commutator surface when you do that. But you need to clean that out, because what that's doing is that's actually allowing electricity to flow between two plates here when it shouldn't. So it's going to be low level, but that's going to cause your motor to, essentially, if it's a 5-pole motor, and not sure on the exact science of it, I've never studied that closely into it. Essentially now it's a 4-pole motor, and your motor is going to be running a lot less efficiently. When motors run inefficiently or can't turn, they produce heat. Heat kills motors. So if your motor's running inefficiently and you try to run it and you're cranking the volts up, it's just going to create heat. And the heat is going to destroy the magnet on the motor, which will then just make the motor run even more inefficiently until it gets to the point where you'll turn it on, the engine will barely start creeping forward, and then you'll go and you'll touch this and you'll burn your fingers. I literally have lost feeling in my fingertips from the amount of hot motors and hot glue and soldering irons I've touched over the year in this hobby. So you don't want a hot motor. A motor that's hot is not doing its job. It's supposed to create rotary locomotion, not heat. When it creates heat, it's running inefficiently, and eventually it will start to destroy itself. The other thing a hot motor will do, these windings in here, just like any motor, 100,000 little copper windings of these wires wrapped around the iron core, those are all covered in lacquer. That lacquer insulates each winding one from the other. What happens is when you get a motor hot, that lacquer cooks and it becomes brittle and it flakes off. And now you have windings shorting out to each other when they shouldn't be. And it's like if each core is supposed to have the wire wrapped around, I don't know, 100 times, I'm guessing. I've never actually rewound one of these. Now it's shorting out. Now maybe it's only actually getting, 30 wraps around. And that's going to, again, create a very inefficient motor. So check your motor. Make sure it's mounted in. Check that your commutator is secure there. The one that Dakota's working on does not have these flywheels. I recommend a motor with flywheels if you can get it. Some of the older ones, you can actually drop a newer, ready-to-run motor directly into there. But the older motors, as long as the magnet is good, they'll run just fine. I've had engines without flywheels, and as long as you keep the wheels clean, they'll be fine. Next thing to check is motion. You've got your drive shafts coming out here, going to your gear towers on your trucks. You can actually see here, you've got gears right down in here. It needs to be oiled. Labelle 107, that's what I use. Some people use other products, but I've always had good luck with that. Every bearing surface needs to be oiled. You need to oil right in here. You got to get a little bit on that motor bearing. Not so much that it's going to get onto the commutator. Commutators and oil and carbon brushes do not mix. A little bit of oil right in here so that you're going to get into these bronze bearings at either end of the motor. If you have any sliding parts, some of these longer engines have little shafts that slide in and out to accommodate for turns and curves and track inconsistencies and such. Put a drop of oil on those. You don't want to over oil because scenery likes to stick to over oiled parts and then it just wears down your parts. But just a drop will do. The tops of the gear towers, you're going to need a drop of oil there and that bushing. Drop my phone because the video is complete without doing that. Hold please. There we go. And a drop right there. Got to do that to both trucks. While you're at it, if you don't want to completely disassemble the truck, put a drop of oil down there. You can see the gear teeth. Put one down there. And oftentimes you can reach down in here and you can see some gear teeth down in here somewhere. Get a drop of oil in there. A couple drops, because when you open these up, there's worm gear goes to 1, and I believe 2, 3 gears in there. So you want those gears lubricated both on the teeth as well as on the spindle or the axle, if you will, that they turn on. You can remove the clips on the bottom. Be very careful when you do. They tend to break. If you have extras on hand, great. If you don't, you got to get a screwdriver under and gently pop these tabs off. On the ready run, you have the axle bearings are here, not here on the trucks. These side frames are just pressed on for decoration, for realism. But you need to get a drop of oil into each of these bearings. Just move the wheel over a little bit, drop a little bit in there, drop a little bit in there, right there, right there. Same on the other truck. On older Blue Box, they have cast metal trucks, and that little bronze bushing or bearing is actually set inside the side frame. And so on those ones, if you have the metal trucks, you actually need to oil the bearing in the side frame, not so much in the center. Yes, there are gear teeth in there that should get oiled, but usually if you put a few drops in the top and drop your phone, as one does, you'll get oil in there. So next thing to check while you're working on it, turn over the drive by hand. So here I'm spinning one of the flywheels. You could grab the drive shaft and do the same thing. Turn it, okay? When you turn it, you should be able to see all of your wheels turning. See that? That tells you your gear train's actually working. These wheels are wheels with a short axle pressed into a center plastic gear. Once in a blue moon, less common on Athearns, very common on Bachmann, you will get that center gear will split or crack, and then these will basically not be holding gauge. They'll be able to slide back and forth, but they will also spin separately from the center. So when you're spinning one of these, go ahead, make sure they all turn, right? You can see that. It also lets you see how dirty your wheels are. Grab one with the thumb, and you should be able to feel the drag, and you should feel it turn. Do this one. Okay, yeah. So you know, if you can feel that dragging against your finger there, okay, it's still turning. Even with resistance on it, that gear's not cracked. I'm sorry, I need a proper stand here at some point. Maybe I'll invest in something like that if I decide to do how-to videos. Same on the other side. Spin, do that. I know some people said, oh yeah, just put bullfrogs, not traction tires on it. These wheels do not have traction tires, nor do they have a space for traction tires. Athearns are all-wheel drive. They are also all-wheel pickup, which is what every single HO locomotive and really every single model railroad locomotive ever should be. Unfortunately, some of the cheaper ones are not. But you do not need traction tires for an engine with metal wheels, all-wheel drive, all-wheel pickup with a die-cast frame. Traction tires are not going to help you. If you have a very low top-end speed, I would be looking at the resistance within the locomotive electrical connections and the resistance within the rails, as well as your transformer. Is your transformer putting out enough voltage for the engine? Are you using a toy train like Bachmann train set transformer, or are you using something like an old MRC Tech 2? You know, what are you using? I know nothing about DCC. I'm old school. I run DC. I've just never had really the interest or the money for the DCC. Nothing wrong with it. It's a cool system. But I like the old stuff. You know, heck, look behind the HO and you'll see some old, I believe those are Penline or Varney coaches. We got a little bit of, you know, this is O gauge here. That's American Flyer O gauge right there. We got a little bit of standard gauge, old Lionel standard gauge, and actually American Flyer standard gauge sitting back here, and scale O but with Lionel trucks on it. So you know, you want to go old school? How about the old Hornby Metropolitan locomotive shell sitting up there? So, you know, nothing wrong with DCC. I just like old trains, but I think old trains should run, not just sit on a shelf forever. So, yeah, electrical connections, you can run solder, joints from the tabs here on the trucks. I shouldn't be using my hand, be using my pointer / file. You can run solder from here to here to here and get rid of this big spring bar. That's good if your spring bar is misshapen. If the spring bar is in good shape, it'll be fine. The connection that a lot of people miss is the ground. It's underneath the motor. You have another clip that holds the two motor halves together, and it just presses onto a bare metal spot with no paint on the chassis. If you take your motor off, check that. Make sure it's not rusted up or corroded, because you need it clean. These trucks are actually ground out also through the frame, through the pins that hold the trucks on, the bolsters. That part is also shiny metal, because that's your ground connection is through the frame, kind of like on your car. So, headlight bar there. So I don't know. That's a few things I would take a look at. Some older Athearns I have noticed, especially the old SW and VO1000, basically your 4-axle switcher or yard goat chassis, they are geared very low. They do just crawl. They do not have a high-end top speed. And same with some of the other road switchers. This is a Jeep 35, I believe, with the little. I don't like this one as much, but with the little spring clips there, usually whenever you get these, this one's like never been run. This was like out of the box. I got it at a thrift store. But usually on these ones, at least one of these tabs, if not all of them, are broken off. You can still set it on, but those are usually broken off. I like the GP7s and the F7s where they actually have body plates on the side that just snap on over the pegs on the fuel tank. So a little simpler. But yeah, there you go. So check those points out, see what you find. I always check out a motor whenever I'm running it for a while. I'll put my finger on it, see if it's getting hot. If it's getting hot, yeah, there's something up. There's something wrong. So yeah, let me know what you find out. There's a few little tips and tricks. I'm sorry I drug this video on for so long, but yeah, let me know if it helps. Catch you later.